Now that we've gone ahead and talked about the anatomy of the digestive system, let's start talking about some of the organs in a little more detail. And I'd like to talk about the stomach. Anatomy means what things look like. Physiology means function of it. So the stomach gets food, which comes down the esophagus, and it goes in there, and then it gets sealed off at the top and the bottom by two small muscle systems called sphincters. And the stomach is what we call both an exocrine and an endocrine organ. We talked about these last year. Exocrine here means it's a gland which secretes some sort of chemical, but it goes into a tube, a duct. And that tube goes down to some target, usually another organ. So, for example, the pancreas secretes enzymes, and they go down a tube into the small intestine. Stomach is a little interesting. It secretes things into tubes, which then go into the inner part of the stomach itself. I know that sounds a little confusing. In contrast, an endocrine gland, that's typically what we think of as somebody who secretes a hormone. And what a hormone actually is a chemical that doesn't go through a duct. It's called ductless because it gets secreted directly into the bloodstream. So hormones go into the bloodstream in this case, but digestive enzymes, exocrine glands, would go directly into a duct. Both of these guys are contained in the inner lining of the stomach itself, which is called the mucosa. Okay, so who are the stomach glands here? Well, the exocrine glands, they're the guys who are going to secrete the chemicals that do digestion. And there's lots of different chemicals, but they're together called gastric juices. Gastric means stomach. So those are the guys who are going to do the digestion. Of course, our major guy is going to be our enzyme pepsin. The endocrine glands are going to secrete a hormone called gastrin. And what we're going to see is that gastrin causes then the release of the gastric juices. So when you first look at food, simply the sight and smell of food can cause this whole process to start. So first we get an endocrine gland, which is going to secrete a hormone called gastrin, which will then stimulate the release of the exocrine glands, which will release the hormones, the gastric juices. Excuse me, the hormone is the enzymes are the gastric juices. Right. Okay, so the stomach contains these glands in the mucosa. They're in a part of it called gastric pits. So they're kind of little protected area. And within those pits, you have two different types of cells. You have chief cells, and they're going to secrete an inactive, that's really important, an inactive enzyme called pepsinogen. Usually when you see the GEN at the end there, it means it's inactive. Now, why would you want your enzyme to be inactive? Because we're kind of worried that the enzyme itself might turn on the stomach and start digesting it, and that'd be really bad. So you want to store your enzymes in an inactive form. How are you going to activate it? Well, the other cells that are in the gastric pits there contain an acid called HCl, which is hydrochloric acid. Okay, and hydrochloric acid is going to activate pepsinogen and turn it into the active form called pepsin, and that's the guy who's going to digest the hormones. Okay, now these are really important places in the stomach wall, and we want to protect them from being digested. And so there's other cells in the mucosal area which secrete mucus. That's kind of where it got its name from. And mucus is fatty stuff which is filled with bicarbonate, and it's going to protect the gastric pits from being digested. Okay. Also, within the stomach wall, within that mucosa, are stretch receptors. I think I spelt that wrong. Stretch receptors. So when food enters in there, the stomach becomes expanded, dilates, and that increases the release of gastric juices, which really get the process going. Final result of all this is to produce the active enzyme called pepsin, which is going to digest proteins. Now, we said before the final product of protein digestion should be amino acids, but the stomach's usually not strong enough to do that. What it does is break it into smaller pieces, tripeptides, or more likely dipeptides. And these guys are going to funnel on down to the next part of the system called the small intestine, where the final digestion to amino acids will take place.